He stood on the porch, silhouetted against the warm light spilling from the home they had built together, his face a mask of cold indifference, his words sharp as shattered glass sliced through the drizzly Portland night. "It's over, Clara. Pack a bag." Inside, every corner held a memory. Every room echoed with plans for the baby growing within her. But now, at 7 months pregnant, she was being cast out into the darkness. He had chosen another woman, a life of glamour he felt he deserved. As he slammed the door on his wife and unborn child, Alex Hudson had no idea he wasn't just throwing away his family. He was throwing away a $20 million secret that would soon become his life's greatest regret. This is the story of how one man's cruelest betrayal led to his ultimate downfall. The late afternoon sun, a pale gold wash typical of an Oregon autumn, filtered through the bay window of their modest bungalow in Portland's Selwood Moorland neighborhood. Clara Hudson, née Beaumont, hummed a soft tune as she folded a tiny, impossibly soft onesie, placing it gently into the top drawer of a freshly assembled white wood dresser. At 7 months pregnant, her world had shrunk to this cozy 2-bedroom house, and she couldn't be happier. Her entire focus was on preparing a warm, loving nest for the baby boy she and her husband, Alex, were expecting. They had met 5 years ago at a university fundraiser. She was a library sciences grad student, volunteering at the check-in table, and he was a promising young architectural intern, his eyes full of dreams to reshape the city's skyline. Alex Hudson was charming, ambitious, and radiated a confidence that Clara, who had always been more reserved, found intoxicating. He told her she was the calm in his storm, the foundation upon which he could build his empire. They married 2 years later, in a simple ceremony at the Crystal Springs Rhododendron Garden, promising a lifetime of partnership and support. Their life was ordinary, but Clara cherished its simplicity. She worked part-time at the Multnomah County Library, enjoying the quiet order of the books and the gentle hum of community. Alex worked long, grueling hours at Harrison & Cole Architects, a prestigious downtown firm. He was often stressed, complaining about his demanding boss, Mr. Harrison, and the constant pressure to land high-profile projects. "It's a shark tank, Clara," he'd say, loosening his tie as he walked in the door. "You have to be ruthless to get ahead. We're just treading water with my salary." Lately, these complaints had become more frequent, tinged with a bitterness that pricked at Clara's heart. He'd scroll through social media, pointing out former classmates, buying sprawling houses in the West Hills or vacationing in Europe. "Look at Matt Peterson," he scoffed one evening, shoving his phone in her direction. "He designed a glorified shoebox for some tech mogul, and now he's driving a Porsche. I'm twice the architect he is." Clara would try to soothe him, rubbing his tense shoulders and reminding him of their own blessings. "We have everything we need, honey. A home, each other, and soon, our little boy. Your time will come." But her words seemed to bounce off an invisible wall of resentment he was building around himself. The long work nights grew more frequent. The scent of an unfamiliar, expensive perfume would sometimes cling faintly to his suit jacket when he came home. He'd dismiss it as just someone at the office, his eyes avoiding hers. He stopped asking about her doctor's appointments and seemed to tune out when she talked excitedly about feeling the baby kick. The man who had once held her as if she were precious glass now felt a million miles away, even when he was sitting right next to her on the sofa. The change was gradual enough that Clara could almost convince herself it was just the stress of his job and the impending responsibility of fatherhood. She redoubled her efforts, making his favorite meals, keeping the house immaculate, and trying not to burden him with her own anxieties. She wanted to be the perfect, supportive wife he needed. The first undeniable crack appeared on a Tuesday. Alex had been out late for a client dinner, and Clara was tidying up his discarded clothes from the bedroom floor. A crumpled receipt fell from his pocket. It was from Vance Jewelers, a high-end boutique downtown, known for its modern, extravagant designs. The date was from the previous week. The item listed was a platinum serpentine necklace. The price made Clara's breath catch in her throat. $4,800. Her mind raced. Their 5th anniversary had passed 2 months ago. Her birthday wasn't for another 4. Christmas was ages away. They had a strict budget, one Alex himself had created, meticulously tracking their spending to save for the baby. They'd had a lengthy discussion just last month about whether they could afford a new, safer car, ultimately deciding against it. Yet here was a receipt for a piece of jewelry that cost more than 3 months of their mortgage payments. She sat on the edge of their bed, the flimsy piece of paper trembling in her hand. A cold dread, heavy and suffocating, settled in her chest. This necklace was not for her. And if it wasn't for her, then all the late nights, the faint perfume, and the chilling distance suddenly clicked into a terrifying, heart-breaking picture. The foundation of her world, the one she believed was built on solid ground, was beginning to crumble beneath her feet. Clara waited until the next evening to confront him. She spent the day in a haze of anxiety, the receipt hidden away in her jewelry box like a venomous secret. She rehearsed the conversation in her head 100 times, trying to find a tone that wasn't accusatory, one that left room for a plausible explanation. Maybe it was a gift for his mother, or a corporate gift for a client's wife. The rationalizations felt thin and desperate even to her. When Alex came home, he seemed more cheerful than he had been in months. He kissed her on the cheek, a perfunctory gesture, and commented on the smell of the roast chicken she'd prepared. "Smells great, Clara," he said, heading straight for the shower, peeling off his work shirt. "I'm starving. The team and I finally cracked the design for the new riverfront project. Harrison was actually impressed." Clara's resolve hardened. This was the man she loved, the father of her child. She owed it to them both to clear the air. After dinner, as they sat in the living room with the television murmuring in the background, she took a deep breath. "Alex," she began, her voice steadier than she expected. "I was doing laundry yesterday, and a receipt fell out of your pocket." He glanced up from his phone, a flicker of something, annoyance, caution, in his eyes. "Okay?" "It was from Vance Jewelers," she continued, watching his face carefully. "For a very expensive necklace. I was just confused. It's a lot of money, and I don't understand what it was for." The mask of charm slammed down. Alex scoffed, a humorless little sound. "Seriously, Clara? You're going through my pockets now." "I wasn't. It fell out. Alex, please, just tell me what it was." "It was a business expense," he snapped, his voice turning sharp. "A thank you gift for a potential investor's wife. These are the kinds of things you have to do to get ahead in my world. Things you wouldn't understand." The condescension in his tone stung more than the lie itself. "You expensed a $5,000 necklace? Alex, we can't afford that. You would have told me. We talk about every major expense." "I handle the finances because you get too emotional about them," he shot back, his voice rising. "God, you're so hormonal lately. Can't you just trust me for once? I am trying to build a better life for us, for this family, and all you can do is nag me about a receipt." He was a master of turning things around, of making her feel small and irrational. It was a tactic he'd used before in minor arguments. But this time it felt different. It felt calculated. Defeated, Clara dropped the subject. But the trust that had been the bedrock of their marriage was now fractured beyond recognition. The final piece of the puzzle was delivered 2 weeks later by her best friend, Jessica Porter. Jessica was everything Clara wasn't: bold, outspoken, and fiercely protective. She called Clara on a Friday afternoon, her voice tight with fury. "Clara, you need to sit down," Jessica said, dispensing with any pleasantries. "I'm so sorry to be the one to tell you this, but I can't let him do this to you. I was at the Gilded Sparrow last night for my boss's retirement dinner. Alex was there." The Gilded Sparrow was one of the most exclusive restaurants in Portland, a place Alex always referred to as being in another stratosphere for their budget. "He might have been with a client," Clara said weakly, the words tasting like ash in her mouth. "He was not with a client," Jessica's voice was firm. "He was with a woman, a tall, blonde woman in a red dress. They were holding hands across the table. Clara. He was feeding her dessert, and she was wearing a very distinctive platinum snake necklace." The air left Clara's lungs. The world tilted on its axis, the cheerful yellow walls of her nursery suddenly feeling like a prison. The lie, the gaslighting, the cruelty of it all crashed down on her. It was real. That night, when Alex came home reeking of wine and the same cloying perfume, she didn't wait. She stood in the entryway, blocking his path, her arms crossed over her swollen belly. She didn't have the receipt this time. She had the truth. "How was your dinner at the Gilded Sparrow?" she asked, her voice dangerously quiet. Alex froze, his keys halfway to the small dish on the console table. The color drained from his face. "What are you talking about? I was working late." "Stop lying to me, Alex," she said, her voice breaking. "Jessica saw you. She saw you with her. She saw the necklace. Just stop." For a moment, he looked like a cornered animal. The carefully constructed walls of his double life came crashing down, and behind them was not a man filled with remorse, but one filled with rage. "Fine," he snarled, dropping his briefcase with a thud. "You want the truth? Fine. Yes, I was with someone. Her name is Tiffany Vance, and I'm in love with her." Each word was a physical blow. Clara staggered back, her hand flying to her mouth. "She understands me," he continued, his voice dripping with a venom she had never heard before. "She sees my potential. She isn't content with this pathetic little life, this tiny house, clipping coupons and pretending to be happy. She wants more. I want more." "More than your wife?" Clara whispered, tears streaming down her face. "More than your son?" He looked at her pregnant belly with an expression of pure disdain. "You want to know the truth, Clara? This baby, you're an anchor. You're holding me back from the life I am supposed to have. Tiffany is my future. You are my past." The man she had married, the man who had vowed to love and protect her, was gone. In his place stood a stranger, a cruel, selfish monster who was shattering her world with a casual brutality that would haunt her forever. The unraveling was complete. The night descended from awful to nightmarish with breathtaking speed. The confession hung in the air between them, thick and poisonous. For a few moments, Clara was too stunned to speak, to move. Her mind reeled, trying to process the monstrous transformation of the man standing before her. What are you saying?" she finally managed to choke out, wrapping her arms around her belly as if to shield her unborn son from the hatred radiating from his father. "I'm saying it's over," Alex said, his voice flat and devoid of any emotion. He walked past her into the bedroom they had shared, the room where they had dreamed of their future, and pulled a large suitcase from the top of the closet. "Tiffany is moving in. I want you out. Tonight." The casual cruelty of the demand was incomprehensible. "Tonight? Alex, look at me. I'm 7 months pregnant. Where am I supposed to go? It's pouring rain outside." "That sounds like a you problem, not a me problem," he said, without looking at her. He began pulling his expensive suits from the closet and tossing them on the bed, making room. Then he turned to her side of the closet. He grabbed a single empty duffel bag and began stuffing it with a random assortment of her belongings, a couple of maternity tops, a pair of leggings, the worn-out sweatshirt she loved. It was a gesture of utter dismissal. Clara followed him, pleading, her voice cracking with desperation. "Alex, please, we can talk about this. We can go to counseling. Think about the baby. He needs his father. I need you." He whirled around, his face contorted in a sneer. "You need me? No, you need a meal ticket. I'm done. I am done with this small, suffocating life." He zipped the duffel bag and threw it at her feet. "There. You're packed." The final, unforgivable blow came when she made one last appeal to his humanity. "How can you do this to your own child?" she sobbed, her body trembling uncontrollably. "He's a part of you." Alex's eyes narrowed into icy slits. He leaned in close, his voice a low, menacing whisper designed to inflict the maximum possible pain. "You know, lately, I've been doing the math. All those headaches you had, all those times you were too tired. It makes a man wonder, how do I even know it's mine?" The accusation was so vile, so baseless, that it knocked the air from her lungs more effectively than a physical punch. It was a strategic strike at the core of her being, an attempt to sever not just their marriage, but her very integrity. It was the last desperate act of a guilty man trying to justify his own monstrosity. That was the moment the love she still clung to finally died, replaced by a profound and hollow agony. She looked at him, truly looked at him, and saw nothing of the man she had married, only a cruel, hollowed-out shell. Without another word, she bent down, the movement awkward and painful with her large belly, and picked up the duffel bag. She walked through the living room, past the half-finished nursery, with its mural of gentle stars and clouds she had painstakingly painted. She walked past the framed photos on the mantelpiece, their wedding day, their first anniversary, the ultrasound picture of their son. A gallery of lies. He followed her to the front door and held it open, an impatient landlord evicting a delinquent tenant. The cold, damp air rushed in, carrying the scent of rain and wet asphalt. "The lease is in my name, so don't even think about trying to come back," he lied. She knew for a fact both their names were on it. It was just another small cruelty. She stepped out onto the porch, not even bothering to grab a coat. The cold rain began to soak through her thin shirt almost immediately. She turned for one last look, a silent question in her eyes. "How could you?" He just stared back, his expression unreadable, and then he closed the door. The click of the lock echoed in the silent, wet street, a sound of absolute finality. Clara stood there on the sidewalk in the pouring rain, pregnant, heartbroken, and utterly alone. The streetlights blurred through her tears. The life she had known was gone, slammed shut like the door in front of her. Her phone was in her purse, which he hadn't even let her retrieve. Her car keys were inside. She had nothing but the clothes on her back and the pathetic duffel bag at her feet. Shivering, she huddled under the meager shelter of a neighbor's overgrown maple tree and began to weep, deep, gut-wrenching sobs for the husband she had lost, the future that had been stolen, and the innocent child who would now be born into a broken world. After what felt like an eternity, a neighbor, Mrs. Gable from 2 houses down, opened her door to let her dog out and saw the lone, drenched figure. Rushing over with an umbrella and a coat, she brought Clara inside her warm, dry home and let her use the phone. With trembling fingers, Clara dialed the only number she could think of, the only person she knew would answer. "Jessica!" she cried into the phone, her voice barely a whisper. "Can you come get me? He threw me out." Jessica Porter arrived in under 15 minutes, her small sedan screeching to a halt at the curb. She found Clara wrapped in one of Mrs. Gable's Afghans, sipping hot tea, her face pale and tear-streaked, her eyes vacant with shock. Without a word, Jessica wrapped her in a fierce hug before leading her out to the car, thanking the bewildered but kind neighbor profusely. The drive to Jessica's apartment was mostly silent, punctuated only by Clara's shuddering breaths. Jessica's place was a small but cheerful one-bedroom in the Hawthorne district, filled with colourful art and overflowing bookshelves. She settled Clara on the couch, wrapped her in another blanket, and put a mug of chamomile tea in her hands. "I'm going to kill him," Jessica said, her voice a low, furious growl as she paced the small living room. "I'm going to find him, and I'm going to key his car, report him to the architectural board, and tell his mother he's the devil incarnate." How could he do this, Clara? How? Clara could only shake her head, fresh tears spilling over. "He said he doesn't even know if the baby is his, Jess." Jessica stopped pacing and stared, her face a mask of disbelief and rage. "That absolute monster. He's trying to justify this to himself, to make you the villain. Don't you dare believe that for 1 second. You are the kindest, most loyal person I know." For the next 2 days, Clara existed in a fog of grief. She barely ate. She slept fitfully on Jessica's couch, waking up from nightmares where she was falling, only to realize her waking life was the real nightmare. Jessica was a rock, forcing her to drink water, making her small, simple meals, and fielding calls from Clara's work at the library to let them know she was ill. On the 3rd morning, Jessica sat down on the coffee table opposite Clara, her expression serious. "Okay, C. You can stay here as long as you need. You know that. But we need to think about next steps. You need to see a lawyer. We need to freeze your joint bank account before he drains it for his little trollop." Clara flinched. The thought of fighting, of legal battles and acrimony, was overwhelming. "I don't have any money for a lawyer, Jess. We lived paycheck to paycheck. Alex handled all the finances. He'll take everything." "You have to fight him," Jessica insisted. "For you and for your son." It was the mention of her son that finally pierced through Clara's apathy. A tiny flicker of resolve ignited within her. She was not just Clara Hudson, the abandoned wife. She was a mother. Her child deserved more than this. He deserved protection. She looked at Jessica, her eyes clearing with a new, somber purpose. "You're right," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "I need to make a phone call." She borrowed Jessica's phone and walked into the spare room for privacy. Her heart pounded against her ribs as she scrolled through her contacts, backed up to her cloud account. She found the number she was looking for under A for Abernathy. Mr. David Abernathy. She hadn't spoken to him in over a year, a deliberate choice to maintain the simple, ordinary life she had so carefully constructed. Now, that life was in ashes, and he was her only lifeline. She pressed call. He answered on the second ring, his voice as warm and steady as she remembered. "David Abernathy speaking." "Mr. Abernathy," Clara said, her voice trembling slightly. "It's Clara. Clara Beaumont." She purposefully used her maiden name. There was a brief pause, then, "Clara, my dear girl, it's wonderful to hear from you. Is everything all right? You sound upset." The dam of her composure broke. The whole sordid story came pouring out. The affair, the cruelty, being thrown out into the street, pregnant and alone, Alex's final, poisonous accusation. Mr. Abernathy listened patiently, his silence punctuated by an occasional sharp intake of breath or a low murmur of outrage. When she finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. Clara worried she had shocked him, that she had burdened this kind, elderly man with her sordid mess. "Clara," he finally said, and his voice was no longer warm. It was like granite. "I want you to listen to me very carefully. This man, this Alex Hudson, has just made the single greatest mistake of his life. He is about to learn what it means to cross a Beaumont." "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "I have nothing." "Oh, my dear girl," Mr. Abernathy said, and now there was a hint of a grim smile in his voice. "That is where you are profoundly mistaken. Do you remember the terms of your parents' trust, the Beaumont Legacy Trust?" "Vaguely," she admitted. "Something about my 30th birthday." "Precisely. The principal becomes fully accessible to you on your 30th birthday, which is still several months away. However, your parents, bless their forward-thinking souls, included a specific clause, an early access provision that would be triggered by one of two life events, a medical emergency or the birth of your first legal heir." Clara's breath hitched. "The baby." "The baby," he confirmed. "Clara, the moment that little boy takes his first breath, you gain full, unrestricted control of the entire trust, and nothing is not quite the right word for its contents. After the market's performance this past decade, the current valuation of the Beaumont Legacy Trust is... Let me see." He paused as he presumably clicked a mouse. "As of market close yesterday, it stands at $20,457,192.38. Clara sank onto the edge of Jessica's guest bed, the phone pressed hard against her ear. $20 million. The number was so vast, so abstract, it didn't seem real. Her parents, Robert and Catherine Beaumont, had been brilliant but quiet software engineers who had gotten in on the ground floor of a major tech company in the 90s. They had lived modestly and invested wisely. When they were killed in a car accident when Clara was just 10, she had been raised by a loving but frugal aunt, shielded from the reality of the fortune they had left her. It was a fortune she had intentionally ignored, a secret she had kept from everyone, including Alex. She had been so afraid of being loved for her money, so desperate to build a life on a foundation of genuine affection, that she had pretended it didn't exist. And now, the man she had chosen, the man she had given her heart to, had proven her fears correct in the most brutal way imaginable. He hadn't known about the money, but his character, tested by his own greed and ambition, had been found wanting. "Mr. Abernathy," Clara said, a new, steely resolve hardening her voice. "I don't just want a lawyer, I want the best." "Clara," David Abernathy replied, his voice ringing with satisfaction. "I've had the partners at Covington and Dunn on retainer for your family for 30 years. They're about to get a very interesting phone call." Alex Hudson felt like the king of the world. With Clara gone, a wave of exhilarating freedom washed over him. The quiet, domestic life he'd found so suffocating was replaced by the vibrant, intoxicating presence of Tiffany Vance. She moved in the day after he threw Clara out, her expensive luggage filling the hallway, her vibrant energy instantly transforming the beige little bungalow into something exciting. "First thing we need to do is get rid of all this drab furniture," Tiffany announced, waving a dismissive hand at the comfortable but worn sofa Clara had picked out. "And these pathetic little floral curtains, I'm thinking minimalist, chrome, glass, black leather. They lived in a whirlwind of indulgence. Tiffany, a senior marketing executive at a rival firm, had expensive tastes and a belief that one had to spend money to make money. They dined at the most exclusive restaurants, drank vintage wines, and went on lavish weekend shopping sprees, all funded by credit cards. Alex was confident he could pay off after his imminent promotion. Tiffany was his beautiful trophy, a testament to the new, successful life he was claiming for himself. When he walked into a room with her on his arm, he felt powerful. He barely thought of Clara. When he did, it was with a flicker of irritation. He imagined she was crying on some friend's sofa, a pathetic, pregnant mess. He'd done her a favor, he told himself. He'd set her free from a marriage that was clearly beyond her. His work, however, began to suffer. His focus was fractured. He was late to meetings, missed deadlines, and made careless errors in his blueprints. The intricate details of structural engineering were lost in his daydreams of a new convertible and a vacation to Monaco with Tiffany. His boss, the notoriously sharp-eyed Mr. Harrison, started watching him with a look of growing disapproval. The first letter arrived a week after Clara left. It came via courier, a thick, cream-colored envelope bearing the embossed letterhead, "Covington and Dunn, Attorneys at Law." Alex opened it casually, assuming it was some sort of bluff from a cheap legal aid lawyer Clara had found. He read the first line and frowned. It was a formal notice of separation, stating that their firm had been retained by Ms. Clara Beaumont. It detailed her intent to file for divorce on the grounds of adultery and extreme emotional cruelty. The second page was a formal request for a complete discovery of assets, demanding full disclosure of all his bank accounts, investments, property, and debts. "Look at this," he laughed, tossing the letter to Tiffany, who was perched on their new Italian leather couch, flipping through a design magazine. "Little Clara is trying to play hardball. Covington and Dunn. She probably can't even afford their coffee." Tiffany glanced at it, a smirk playing on her lips. "How pathetic. Let her try." "What's she going to take? Half of your credit card debt?" They dismissed it as a desperate, empty threat. A few days later, a uniformed officer served Alex with a restraining order at his office, right in front of his colleagues. The order prohibited him from contacting Clara or coming within 500 feet of her, citing the risk of emotional distress and endangerment to his unborn child. The public humiliation was intense. Mr. Harrison called him into his office, his face grim, and closed the door. "Whatever is going on in your personal life, Hudson," he said sternly, "keep it out of my firm. This is a family-oriented business. I won't have this kind of drama associated with Harrison and Cole." Alex returned to his desk, his face burning. The whispers of his co-workers followed him. The final, life-altering delivery arrived on a Saturday morning. Alex and Tiffany were lounging in their robes, sipping mimosas, when a process server knocked on the door. He handed Alex a thick, box-like envelope. "You've been served," the man said flatly, and left. "More love letters from the ex," Tiffany drawled, not looking up from her phone. Alex tore it open. Inside was a mountain of paperwork. The cover letter stated that it was the preliminary financial disclosure from Ms. Beaumont's legal team, provided as a professional courtesy before the official court filing. He began flipping through the pages: legal jargon, tax forms, asset declarations. It all seemed standard. And then he reached the last section: Schedule of Assets, Beaumont Legacy Trust. He stared at the page. It was a consolidated statement from a San Francisco-based wealth management firm. His eyes scanned the columns of figures, the lists of stocks, bonds, and real estate holdings. He didn't understand most of it, but he understood the number at the bottom of the page, printed in bold, undeniable black ink. Total current value, $2,457,192.38. The mimosa glass slipped from his hand, shattering on the new hardwood floor, the orange juice and champagne pooling like a sickening sunrise. "What is it?" Tiffany asked, annoyed at the interruption. "Alex, what's wrong with you?" He couldn't speak. He could only hold out the trembling piece of paper. Tiffany snatched it from him, her eyes scanning the page. Her perfectly made-up face went through a rapid series of transformations: confusion, to disbelief, to a stark, predatory avarice, and finally to pure, unadulterated fury. She looked from the paper to Alex, her blue eyes turning to chips of ice. $20 million, she whispered, the words barely audible. Then her voice rose to a shriek. "You told me she was a librarian. You told me she had nothing. You idiot! You unbelievable, moronic idiot!" The architect of a new, glamorous life suddenly felt the blueprints of his world burning to ash around him. He had not just thrown out his wife. He had thrown away a queen. The number on the page seemed to vibrate with a life of its own. $20 million. It was an impossible sum, a figure from a movie, not from the life of the quiet, unassuming woman he had married and discarded. Alex Hudson's mind refused to process it. This had to be a mistake, a typo, a sick joke. "It's a fake," he stammered, grabbing the document back from Tiffany. "She's trying to scare us. It's a bluff." But the document was too detailed, too professional. It listed holdings in blue-chip stocks, shares in tech giants, real estate properties in prime California locations, all meticulously documented by a prestigious firm. The sheer weight of the evidence was crushing. This was real. Clara, the woman who fretted over using coupons at the grocery store, the woman who wore the same winter coat for 5 years, the woman he had called a financial burden, was an heiress. And he, in his blind arrogance, had thrown her and her fortune out into the rain. Tiffany's reaction was immediate and brutal. The loving, supportive partner persona vanished, replaced by a creature of pure venom. "A bluff!" she screamed, her voice shrill with rage. "Are you that stupid? No one fakes a 100-page portfolio from a top-tier investment house. You had a winning lottery ticket in your hand, a golden goose, and you strangled it because you wanted a shinier toy." "I didn't know," he yelled back, his voice cracking with panic. "How could I have known?" "You should have known," she retorted, jabbing a finger at his chest. "You should have paid attention. You were so obsessed with what you didn't have that you never even bothered to see what you did. I hitched my wagon to you because I thought you were smart, ambitious. But you're just a fool. You lost me $20 million. The me was not accidental. Her beautiful face was twisted with a greed and contempt so naked it was terrifying. He saw with horrifying clarity that she had never loved him. She had loved the idea of him, the potential for success, and the lifestyle it would bring. The moment he was revealed not as a stepping stone, but as an obstacle to a much larger prize, he became worthless to her. The next week was a descent into hell. His desperate, groveling phone calls to Clara went straight to a new, unfamiliar voicemail. He sent texts professing his undying love, begging for forgiveness, blaming Tiffany for everything. They were met with a wall of digital silence. At work, the atmosphere was arctic. His colleagues avoided his gaze. The restraining order incident had made him a pariah. On Thursday, Mr. Harrison called him into his office for the last time. "Hudson, this isn't working out," the older man said, not bothering to sit down. "Your performance has been abysmal for months. Your focus is gone. And frankly, the reputation of this firm is paramount. I've been hearing things about your personal situation, abandoning your pregnant wife. It's a disgusting business. We're terminating your employment, effective immediately. Security will escort you out." Stunned, Alex packed his personal belongings into a cardboard box, the walk of shame past his former colleagues, a blur of averted eyes and whispers. He arrived home to find the front door ajar. Inside, the house was a scene of chaos. The new furniture was gone. The closets were empty of Tiffany's designer clothes. She had taken everything she had brought into the house, and more. A quick check of his online banking app confirmed his worst fears. Their joint savings account was empty. His credit cards, which he had foolishly added her to, were maxed out to their limits. On the kitchen counter, where he'd left the financial disclosure from Clara's lawyers, was a single sheet of paper. It was a note from Tiffany, written in her sharp, elegant script. "Alex, thanks for nothing. You're the biggest disappointment I've ever met. Don't contact me again. Ever." He was alone, no girlfriend, no job, and now, buried under a mountain of debt that Tiffany had gleefully created, the house he had stolen felt cavernous and cold. The silence was deafening, broken only by the drip of a leaky faucet and the frantic thumping of his own heart. That night, consumed by a toxic cocktail of panic, self-pity, and rage, he fell apart. He sank to the floor in the empty living room and finally did what he should have done a month ago. He cried. But he didn't cry for Clara or for the child he had disowned. He cried for himself. He cried for the cars, the houses, the respect, and the easy life he had held in his grasp and fumbled away. He was the architect of his own ruin, and he was now trapped in the wreckage. He picked up his phone and dialed Clara's number again, listening to it ring and ring before the detached voice of the voicemail system answered. "Clara, baby, please," he sobbed into the phone, leaving a pathetic, rambling message. "It's me. I made a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake. I love you. I've always loved you. It was Tiffany. She manipulated me. We can fix this. Please, just call me back. Think of our son. Think of our family." But he knew, with a chilling certainty that settled deep in his bones, that no one was ever going to call him back. 6 months passed, dragging Alex Hudson further into the abyss, while Clara Beaumont quietly and powerfully rebuilt her world on a new, unshakable foundation. The scene could not have been more different from the drizzly Portland sidewalk where she had last stood, broken and alone. Clara sat in a sun-drenched breakfast nook overlooking the sparkling waters of the San Francisco Bay. The air was warm, scented with salt and blooming jasmine from the garden of her new home in Sausalito. A beautiful, modern house with wide windows and secure gates. In her arms, she held her son, Noah, a beautiful, healthy 2-month-old with a full head of dark hair and his mother's calm, observant eyes. She was no longer the timid, accommodating woman who had tried to shrink herself to fit into Alex's small ambitions. Motherhood, combined with the sudden and staggering responsibility of her inheritance, had forged a new strength within her. With the guidance of Mr. Abernathy, who had become the grandfather she never had, she took control of her legacy. She wasn't interested in a life of idle luxury. The pain of her experience had given her a profound sense of purpose. After ensuring Noah's future was secure, she dedicated a significant portion of her resources to establishing the Beaumont Foundation, a charitable organization with a clear, heartfelt mission to provide housing, legal aid, and support for single mothers and children facing crisis situations. Her own story, though she kept the details private, was the catalyst. She knew firsthand the terror of being pregnant, alone, and feeling as though you had nowhere to turn. She was determined to be the lifeline for other women that she, by sheer luck of birth, had possessed all along. She was on a video call with Jessica, who was cooing at the screen. "Oh my gosh, Clara, he's smiling. Look at that little face. You look amazing, by the way. Motherhood and being a millionaire philanthropist suits you." Clara laughed, a genuine, joyful sound. "It's been a whirlwind, but it's good. Seeing the first families move into the Foundation's new transitional housing unit last week, that felt more real than any of this," she said, gesturing around at her beautiful home. "It feels like I'm finally honoring my parents in a way that matters." "And what about him?" Jessica asked, her voice softer. "Have you heard anything?" Clara's smile faded slightly, but her expression remained serene. "His lawyer contacts mine occasionally. They're still trying to argue for a larger settlement, claiming he contributed to the marital estate by providing emotional support while I was unknowingly wealthy," she said, with a humorless shake of her head. "Mr. Abernathy's team finds it amusing. They've offered him a small, one-time settlement to go away for good, mostly to cover the debts he accrued with her. If he doesn't take it, we go to court, and all the sordid details come out. He'll take it." She felt no hatred for Alex anymore, only a profound and distant pity. He was a chapter of her life that was now closed, a lesson learned in the harshest way possible. Her focus was on the future, on her son, and on the legacy of compassion she was building. Thousands of miles away, in a cramped, dreary apartment on the outskirts of Portland, Alex Hudson sat in the dark, the blue light of his laptop screen illuminating his haggard face. The pristine bungalow had been foreclosed on. He was working a dead-end job as a draftsman for a small construction company, the pay barely enough to cover his rent and the minimum payments on the crushing debt Tiffany had left him. His grand architectural dreams were a forgotten language. He had become obsessed with searching for news about Clara. Tonight, he found it. A feature article in a Bay Area business journal titled "The Quiet Philanthropist, Clara Beaumont's New Foundation Offers Hope." There she was. The picture showed a woman he barely recognized. She was radiant, poised, and confident, holding a beautiful baby boy. She stood in front of an elegant building, the sign behind her reading, "Beaumont House." The article spoke of her incredible generosity, her resilience, her dedication to helping others. It mentioned her parents' legacy and her quiet strength in turning personal hardship into a force for public good. He stared at the image of Clara and the baby, his son. A son he had disowned, a son who would never know him. A son who would grow up, surrounded by love, security, and a fortune Alex could now only dream of. The weight of his colossal mistake finally crushed him, not with the sting of lost money, but with the eternal ache of lost love, lost family, and lost honor. He had thrown away a life of genuine warmth and a woman of incredible substance in his greedy pursuit of a shallow illusion. He closed the laptop, plunging the room back into darkness. He was alone with his regret, a ghost haunted by the magnificent life he was never meant to have because he had failed to value the one he already did. 5 years is a lifetime. For Clara Beaumont, it was the time it took to build an empire of compassion. The Beaumont Foundation was no longer a fledgling startup, but a widely respected institution with branches in 3 states. Her name was synonymous with resilience and generosity. She was a poised, articulate leader who moved with an effortless confidence that felt as though it had been hers forever. The timid, heartbroken woman she had once been was a ghost, a memory from a different life. Her son, Noah, was a bright, joyful 5-year-old with an insatiable curiosity about the world. He was the sun in her universe, his laughter the soundtrack of her life. He knew his mother was special, that she helped people, and he was proud of her. He knew the story of his father in the simple, age-appropriate terms Clara and a child psychologist had crafted, a man who wasn't ready to be a dad, who had made some very sad choices, but whose leaving had allowed Noah and his mummy to build the wonderful life they now had. There was no bitterness in the telling, only a quiet truth. For Alex Hudson, those same 5 years had been a brutal, grinding penance. After losing everything, he had spiraled, spending nearly a year in a haze of cheap whiskey and suffocating self-pity. Rock bottom came in the form of an eviction notice from his squalid apartment. Staring at the notice, he finally saw his reflection in the grimy window, a hollow-eyed stranger with a scraggly beard and trembling hands. The shame was so absolute, so profound, that it finally broke through the layers of his ego. That was the day he started to climb back. He entered a 12-step program. He found a steady, unglamorous job as a city building inspector, a role that felt like cosmic irony. He spent his days examining the foundations and structures of other people's dreams, hyper-aware of how he had failed to inspect his own. He lived in a small, clean apartment, paid his debts, and re-established a quiet, solitary life. He followed news of the Beaumont Foundation with a strange mixture of pride and agony. It was his only link to Clara, a testament to the goodness he had so callously discarded. He never tried to contact her. He knew he had forfeited that right forever. The news that the foundation was opening its first major project in Portland, a 50-unit supportive housing complex for families, sent a jolt through him. A dedication ceremony was planned. Clara would be there. He told himself he wouldn't go. It was masochistic. It was pointless. But as the day approached, an undeniable pull, a need for some kind of closure overwhelmed him. He had to apologize, not to win her back, not to ask for a role in his son's life. He knew those doors were welded shut, but simply to unburden his soul of the words he had failed to say 5 years ago. He attended the dedication, standing at the very back of the crowd, hidden by a large oak tree. He saw her at the podium, elegant and powerful, speaking with a passion that captivated everyone. He saw his son, Noah, sitting in the front row next to Jessica, looking up at his mother with pure adoration. The boy was the perfect blend of them both, and the sight was a fresh stab to Alex's heart. After the ceremony, as the crowd dispersed, Alex waited. He watched as Clara hugged her friends and supporters, a warm, genuine smile on her face. Finally, she and Noah, holding hands, began walking toward a black town car, waiting in a reserved spot. This was his only chance. He stepped out from behind the tree, his heart hammering against his ribs. "Clara," he said, his voice hoarse. She stopped instantly, her body going rigid. A flicker of the old fear crossed her face before it was replaced by a calm, guarded composure. Her hand tightened on Noah's. "Alex," she said, her tone level and unreadable. He looked terrible, and she knew it. He was thin, and the lines on his face told a story of hard years. The arrogant swagger was gone, replaced by a deep-seated weariness. "I know I have no right," he began, holding his hands up in a gesture of peace. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I had to see you. I had to say it." He took a shaky breath, his eyes meeting hers. "There are no excuses for what I did. I was a cruel, weak and selfish man. The things I said, the way I treated you, it was monstrous. And I am sorry. I am so profoundly sorry for the pain I caused you, for abandoning you and him." His gaze flickered toward Noah, who was hiding shyly behind Clara's leg. Clara listened, her expression unchanging. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times in the early years, fantasized about screaming at him, about hurting him as he had hurt her. But now, seeing him so broken, she felt nothing but a quiet, somber finality. "Thank you for the apology, Alex," she said simply. From behind her leg, Noah peeked out and whispered, "Mummy, who is that man?" Clara looked down at her son, her expression softening. She turned back to Alex, a final, unspoken boundary being drawn between them. "That man is someone I used to know a long time ago," she said, her voice gentle but firm. "It's time for us to go, sweetie." She didn't offer forgiveness. She didn't offer anger. She offered him nothing but the truth. He was part of a past she had survived and overcome. As she turned and led Noah to the car, Alex stood frozen, watching the woman and the child who should have been his life. He had delivered his apology into the void, and the void had given him the only answer it could. Nothing. It was the absolution he deserved. He watched the car pull away, its red tail lights disappearing into the twilight, and for the first time in 5 years, he felt the heavy chains of his past finally, irrevocably, fall away. He was left alone with his regret. But at last, he was free to carry it. And so, Alex Hudson was left with nothing but the echoes of his own cruel words and the crushing knowledge of what he had thrown away. It wasn't just the $20 million. It was the woman of immense character who held that fortune, and the innocent child who was his son. Clara Beaumont, in turn, discovered that her greatest wealth wasn't the money in the bank, but the strength she found in her darkest hour. She transformed her pain into a powerful legacy of hope for others, proving that true fortune is measured not by what you have, but by what you give. This story is a powerful reminder that our choices define us, and that karma, sooner or later, settles all accounts. What did you think of Alex's ultimate fate? Do you believe he got what he deserved? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story moved you, please give this video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who appreciates a story of justice and resilience. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas that will leave you thinking. Thank you for listening.